We'll get started here and we'll let people join as they may. I'm Doris Mold, and I am one of two co-CEOs for Annie's Project. My counterpart is Carisha Devlin, who's also on. Carisha, if you'd like to say hello.
Hello, everyone. We're excited that you're with us today and hope you enjoy today's showcase.
Thank you, Carisha. So today our showcase is agricultural law education, and we're featuring Maryland and Delaware's Annie's Project. We're doing these showcases because we are celebrating our 20th year, and we thought what better way to celebrate 20 years than to see what goes on with different Annie's projects throughout the United States. And we're pleased to have our folks from Maryland and Delaware with us today. We also want to do a thank you to Farm Credit. We appreciate their support of our 20th anniversary activities, as well as general support for Annie's across the country. This is Ruth Hamilton. She is the brainchild behind Annie's Project. She is the founder and currently serves as the treasurer for Annie's Project. And you may wonder, well, where did Annie's Project come from? Well, it came from experiences, the life experiences of what we call the original Annie. Annie was Ruth's mother, and Ruth saw that how her mother, came from town, married into a farm family, and was, I guess, what people would denote as a farm wife. But then she became the farmer herself and sent her husband off to work in town. And Ruth saw that the challenges that her mother faced as a woman farmer, as a woman in agriculture, and decided as she went into her professional career as an agricultural extension educator that women continued to have some challenges when it came to farm management, risk management. And so Ruth came up with the Annie's Project program to help fill some of the gaps in the education and efforts that were out there to connect with women in agriculture, and in particular women farmers, ranchers, growers, and producers. Just so you know what we've done here in the past, we do have recordings of all of our past sessions. So if you happen to miss one of these fantastic sessions, we'd encourage you to go to our YouTube channel where we post our sessions. So you can see that we've had everything from cybersecurity and margin squeeze to succession planning, and then contingency planning for your operation. And today we have ag law. And West Virginia is going to surprise us here soon with when they announce their topic that will be covered on November 8th. We are going to continue this project. It's been so popular, and we've had a lot of demand both from people watching live as well as watching our webinars. We also wanted to make note that we do have a new pilot program that we are coordinating with Risk Management Agency and 3 other nonprofits around the country. And it is learning how to become a crop insurance agent or loss adjuster. And right now we are in the preliminary pilot portion of the program, and we do have some people that we have signed up to be participants, and there may be additional openings in the future. So if you have an interest in that, please let us know. If there are some openings, we can certainly add you to our waiting list. And also, I would be remiss if I did not mention this. This month, we're excited to have an Annie's Project conference and celebration of our 20 years. And we'll be having this conference in St. Louis, and there is still time to sign up. If you go to the Annie's Project website, you can sign up there, and we have the early bird deadlines have been extended as well. So with that, I am going to stop my share, and I'm going to turn it over to Shannon Dill, and Shannon will take us the rest of the way. Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you so much for having me here today. Go ahead and pull a couple of slides up to tell you what we've been doing as far as Annie's Project goes in the state of Maryland. And I added Delaware here. They've been partners since 2010 with us. My name's Shannon Dill. I'm a county agent in Talbot County, which is on the eastern shore of Maryland. And I'm a co-facilitator with Jenny Rhodes. She is to the north, the county north of me, which is Queen Anne's County. And we attended a risk management training back in the early 2000s. I got trained and we had our first Annie's class in 2008. And we're really proud of our timeline. So I added a couple things. This is one I've been building on over the years. So thank you for the presentation to add on to our timeline. We first started Annie's in 2008 in just one site in Maryland. We expanded in 2010 through a risk management grant to 10 sites in Maryland and Delaware. We partner quite a bit with them, on various types of extension projects. In 2012, I think we really elevated the program and the women in ag visibility we have through hiring a part-time coordinator, and we started very heavily in social media. In 2013, it's something valuable to me that we added USDA FSA borrower training. And so our Annie's project since then has been able to certify FSA borrowers in a local face-to-face training as opposed to some type of possibly correspondence course that they have options for. In 2014, to connect with people year-round, we started Wednesday webinars, and we've continued to offer them every year since then. Those are monthly regular meetings that we have. We have a great YouTube channel with over 200 videos on there. In 2018, we graduated. This is sort of a total where we had 84 Annie's Project classes, and we had a mailing list of 900 women. In 2021, we did not have a class. That was our first and only year that we've never had an Annie's Project class. Of course, due to COVID, 2020, we were able to start classes. We had a couple that didn't graduate, but we've since then followed up with them and graduated those classes. And in 2022, we conducted our first 100% virtual Annie's Project class with 28 participants, and 14 of those were FSA borrowers. So our target audience are women with a passion for agriculture. We find in Maryland and Delaware, they maybe don't refer to themselves as farm women. So we use the word women in ag. It's those that have that interest in, it's anyone that has, been in farming for decades, or those that just say, I like farming, or I'm thinking about it and I'd like to come. So by the numbers, our average age is about 46. Acres owned, that's of course a total. Average years farming are 16. So we definitely have some very new farmers, and we have some very long-standing farmers that have attended the program. So the class participation in total over the years, we've graduated 794 graduates around the state in Maryland and Delaware. We've had 105 of our supper classes where we just have sort of one evening type event. We've had 81 borrowers, and we've had 21 unique sites. So again, very proud of the numbers and the expansion that we've been able to connect over the years. We do have a set evaluation that we've conducted, and these are sort of the metrics that we measure every Annie's class. These are 8, and we do an end of class and then a follow-up. And so you can see we've had some great action items as a result of Annie's Project, anywhere from family and communication and relations to one of Paul's favorite, updating and creating their estate plans. We've got them checking credit reports, using computers for farm efficiency. So these are sort of what our class objectives are. We want people to leave the class with empowerment to take these actions on their farm and for their business. We do ask about profitability, and we have the average participant increasing profitability by around $3,300. We try to do quantitative and qualitative data. We have some great testimonials about learning more about insurance and changing their insurance policy to enacting an estate plan on their farm. So we've had some great long-term results from the project. We do have other activities around sort of the women in ag audience. that includes Managing for Today and Tomorrow, which was an estate planning curriculum that we implemented. We have an annual Women in Ag conference. We have annual farm tours, which we just had one on Wednesday. That was amazing. Weather was beautiful. We have monthly webinars, and then we have regular newsletters. We try to keep our website up to date, and social media postings. So just a few photos. This is Brenda. She's a farmer to the south of us. And this is Jenny and I visiting her farm. She lost her husband, and now she farms with her son. Just a wonderful example of a woman in agriculture who runs the business and works there on the farm with her son. This is one of our fall tours a number of years ago over in Delaware with our Maryland and Delaware constituents. We went to Pfeiffer's Orchard and to see what they were doing there and to visit them. So just a couple takeaways. There's more women than ever in the industry. So being able to connect with them in this program has been important. Their connection to land and animals is really a strong one. And women have really said they second guess themselves, and being able to come to class and have that network of people and experts that they can reach out to and professionals in each other has really helped them over the years with their businesses. Always looking for opportunities to learn and network. And we really try to add time for networking, whether we're having a meal, going on a tour, having some discussion time. We really try to have that be built into our programs. So with that, this is just a little bit of information about us. This is our Facebook page. If you're on social media, we'd love you to join us. And then this is our web pages. And I'm going to stop sharing so Paul can pull up his PowerPoint. That's what you came here today to hear. And just really like to shout out to our Agriculture Law Initiative. They came on a few years after Annie's Project class started, and they've been educators every time we've had classes on a variety of topics. So they've been an invaluable resource to us. So Paul.
Yeah, so thank you, Shannon, and thank everyone for the opportunity to present on this today. Hopefully everyone can see my PowerPoint in a working Zoom right after 3 years of doing this. But yeah, I'm going to talk today about our Ag Law Education Initiative and then give a sample sort of presentation we would give in a normal Annie's class. So I'm going to get okay, click in the PowerPoint. So I'll talk more about this in the next coming slides, but the Ag Law Education Initiative is a collaboration between the Carey School of Law at Baltimore, the College of Ag and Natural Resources at College Park, where I'm located, and then the School of Agriculture and Natural Sciences at our 1890 University of Maryland Eastern Shore. We're part of University of Maryland Empowering the State, which is basically a collaboration between the professional schools at University of Maryland, Baltimore, with the law school, medical school, school of public social work, and a few other schools, professional schools are located. And then the programs here at College Park. And you can find all our information at umaglaw.org. We have social media. I guess I need to change that to X now, and I forgot to do that. I should really update that. Or we're on Facebook at mdaglaw.org, and we're doing a conference in a couple of weeks. I think I have a slide on that here in a minute. I already talked about that. As I like to point out, none of this is legal advice. We're all good with that. It's being recorded, so you guys will remember it. So let's talk about the Ag Law Education Initiative. So it started in basically, if I remember correctly, 2012, when the General Assembly gave money to the University of Maryland system as a way to develop a program to preserve family farms and help producers with legal issues. The basic general mandate originally was to help with estate planning and all other legal issues that could potentially drive the loss or drive farmers out of business. This was precipitated based on a lawsuit that went on the Eastern Shore, but we're not going to talk about that today. We'll talk about the positive things that have come out of that. And as a part of that, the Carey School of Law at Baltimore, College Park through the College of Ag, and then University of Maryland Eastern Shore joined together to start collaborating. They would have founded that in early 2013, and shortly after that, I was pulled in as a faculty member here, already doing some of this, and told that I had to be a part of this and start working on it. And I haven't been allowed to stop since for some reason. It just continues to give me stuff to do. So we work to educate ag families throughout the state on various issues. We are basically embedded now within University of Maryland Extension. I'm a campus-based specialist, but we have, somebody through the 1890 at UMES working with that audience. And then along with that, we have folks at the law school who also do outreach through extension as well. We do extension fact sheets. We have our legal specialists. We provide research support for attorneys when needed to help them better understand cases. And we do an annual conference that I highlight here, I think on the last slide. So we have a whole host of publications on the website. We have liability, general negligence, right to farm that I'm going to talk about here in a minute, community supported agriculture. When we kind of got started, the Department of Ag came to us and said, hey, there's this problem. A lot of these people that are doing community supported ag don't want to do contracts because they got into this, so they didn't have to do contracting. They don't want to do a contract, but then something fails on the farm, and then they have all these customers who are mad, who don't understand that they're not going to get product. So we worked with them, or worked with those growers to help provide contracting resources. So in the end, they have a contract, but it doesn't read like a contract because they didn't want a formal contract. They just wanted something slightly more less formal. So that was an interesting project to help do that we provided resources for. Yeah, Shannon pointed out, I do a lot on estate planning. It's my favorite topic to talk about because it allows me to just basically hammer in that people need to be thinking about this, because sadly, all of us die at some point, and we do have to think about it. Do a lot with farm labor throughout the state, just because we have a mix of labor coming in, leasing issues as well. It's one of the first things I worked on when I got here. Privacy issues, because we have potential issues with state regulators, drones, other things that can happen, risk management, and on farm breweries, because we have a developing on-farm, I guess the best way to put it is on-farm liquor scene with wineries, breweries, and distilleries. So providing resources so people looking to get into that field can kind of understand what the rules are within that. We do a lot with student engagement, law students, undergrads, do extension outreach, provide real world opportunities, and we have law classes focused in on this. I don't think we currently have one at the law school because that person has left over the summer, so I don't know where that's currently at, but I know here at College Park and at UMES we have that as well. All those resources are available there. You can also go there to check out our annual conference that will be on November 16th. We have a virtual component for it. Sadly, you do have to pay for that virtual component because it's at a hotel and it costs us additional money to be able to set the support up for that so it can be live streamed, but you'll have interaction with the speakers and everything there. So if you're interested in it, if you just go to umaglawed.org, you can click on that link, and there's a link for the annual conference. And hopefully, if the website is finally running correctly and the old link has been taken out, it will take you to the current registration site. There's been a mix-up and it's been taking you to the old registration site for last year's conference, but I think we have finally gotten that fixed, which that is Paul's fault for not being able to handle a website. So I'm gonna check. If folks have questions related to ag law education, I can talk about that. But I don't see any in the chat, so I'm going to keep going. And I don't see any questions and answers. But if you have any questions on the Ag Law Education Initiative, let me know. I think a couple of folks from it are on as participants in the webinar, so as well. So now we're going to move into the general sort of what does a normal legal presentation for an Annie's project look like that might not be focused on leasing or estate planning. Within that. So a lot of what we end up dealing with within the state, because if you don't know anything about Maryland, as I always point out to my colleagues in other states that do not believe Maryland has agriculture, that we have these two large urban centers in the middle of the state, and then everything to the left or the right is pretty much a rural area where some form of agriculture goes on. But we have people moving into these areas from outside, the urban areas, and may not always understand what goes on a farm, may have never been near a farm in their life, but yet now they're moving in and they're experiencing a whole new set of things as they move into these areas. And they may think they know what nuisance law is, but they don't understand what nuisance law is, plus the right to farm law. And that's what creates some of the tensions and issues around the state. So let's talk about nuisance. And then that will lead into right to farm. So the first thing I want to point out is right to farm laws are a product of the 1980s. Within nuisance law, when we talk about nuisance here, I think on the next slide, one of the things that came out pre-1980s is that within this idea of nuisance law, we have this idea of coming to the nuisance. That if you move into an area and you're see, things that could potentially create odors, dust, other disturbances that may impact your use of your property that you're buying, you can't later argue a nuisance because you moved into the area and you were fully aware. This is the idea of coming to the nuisance. But the problem with this is it's not really a complete defense. It was always just something we put in the equation to weigh it out. The best example of this being used by a court pre-right to farm laws is in the 1960s. If anybody on here is from Arizona, I believe this feedlot still exists, if I remember correctly. There was a feedlot by the name of Spur Industries that was located near Sun City. And Del Webb, the home builder, built a housing development near that feedlot that slowly expanded, and within 7 or 8 years was fully abutting the feedlot. And shockingly, the houses near the feedlot didn't sell for some reason because there were odors, dust, flies, other things associated that potentially kept people from moving in. Del Webb did the American thing, as I always point out, and they sued Spur. The court agreed that Spur had basically, due to urbanization, become a nuisance. But because Del Webb precipitated this urbanization by developing real close to this feedlot, Del Webb had to pay to move Spur to another location where they wouldn't be a problem. That makes sense. They didn't allow coming to the nuisance to work because the area had changed. This happened around the country with similar results as we saw urbanization move in. So these right to farm laws slowly started to develop in the 1980s. So a nuisance, what is a nuisance? It's a condition or activity or situation such as a loud noise, foul odor that interferes with someone's use and enjoyment of their property. So it's doing something that interferes with your neighbor. And as I always point out to people when they see this, what do farms do? They create loud noises. They create foul odors. They have other things associated with them that could interfere with someone's use and enjoyment of their property. The idea with all this is you should not be able to create conditions on your property that impact someone else's use and enjoyment of their property. That'll make sense. That was not for me. I was just checking the chat to make sure. So my example always has been, you live next door to a field that has poultry litter applied to it. Spreading of litter impacts your use and enjoyment of your property by limiting what you can do outside. Is that a nuisance? Well, based on the definition I gave you, it is potentially a nuisance. But the thing the court's going to look at is, was that an intentional interference? So are you intentionally doing it? In the case of litter applications, I would say that's intentional. You intended to put it down, but you didn't know it was going to interfere. So is it intentional interference? It's Probably close, but we don't know. And that intentional interference has to be unreasonable. So whatever we're doing in the end, it has to be unreasonable. So with those two elements I just gave you, intentional interference and unreasonable, what does that mean? Well, we look at a lot of factors with that. Courts weigh factors in this. This is the hardest one to figure out because, as I point out a lot of times to my undergrads, we never know what a nuisance is going to be until a court tells us what it's going to be. I have an example I often use that I won't use today because we don't have enough time for it. But we look at what is the extent of the harm involved? How broad is the impact from application of poultry litter impacting someone? What's the social value of the harm involved? So we're growing a crop with that. There's social value in that. What's the social value of the use impacted? Well, you're using it at a home. You can't entertain. You can't do other things. That potentially is going to have some social value. And then the final thing we look at, what's the suitability of the harm to the current area? Is it like a pig in the parlor and not in the backyard? So if we're doing this in an area that's exclusive, ag with some mix of residential, it's much more suitable for that area than it would be if I was doing this in downtown Baltimore, where it may not be as suitable. So we have to think about that. So as I always point out, if you don't know what this fine American movie is, Smokey and the Bandit, a movie that makes no sense today if you actually are to rewatch it, but still good. At one point, Burt Reynolds goes, just how dumb you are depends on where you're standing at that moment in this country. What a nuisance is depends on where you're standing at that moment. What's a nuisance here may not be a nuisance somewhere else, and vice versa. So we always have to pay attention to where we're standing when we think about this in that case. So now that we kind of know what a nuisance is, let's talk about right to farm law. So this is Delaware's right to farm law. And this is the best example. Delaware oddly has two laws on the books that do the same thing, that basically say the same thing. It's really weird. No other state in the union has this, and this is only something that's recently come to my attention. You can't have an ag operation within the state of Delaware become a nuisance as long as it's been in operation for a period of more than 1 year. So what's more than 1 year? How many days is 1 year? 365. So if we hit days 366, we've been in operation for more than 1 year. And it cannot become a nuisance as a result of a changing condition or about the locality where that ag operation has existed. So as long as it was in an area that was ag before it became more urbanized, it's fine. We don't have that changing condition. The law may not apply, but that's to slightly be decided by a court. So the rest of the language, and I highlighted it for you just so you can see it. As long as it's existed for more than 1 year and it's in compliance with all applicable state, federal rules, regulations, and permits, and it's based on that changing condition, it's going to be protected by the right to farm law. So as I point out, you got to be in operation for 1 year. And you got to comply with all applicable laws. I don't have a slide on this, but one thing that's come about recently is where it points out you have to be in compliance with all applicable state and federal laws. One state law we may not think about in all of this, and this is broadly written, Maryland's is not as broadly written as this, is this includes tort law as well, trespass. The reason I bring this up, we had a Kansas hog farmer decides he needs to pump out basically all of the waste that's coming out, apply it to a field, requires him to run 3 pipes, 2 for water, 1 for the waste, to be able to apply it through a center pivot irrigation system. In Kansas, he can run that along the county right away, along the road. As long as he gets the permission and sets everything up properly to do that, he's going to be fine. He didn't do that. He just decided to run it along the right of way with no permission from the county and no permission from the neighboring landowners. If you don't know how right of ways work, if you're the owner of butting the road you own part of the right of way still. The county or the state, in most cases, only gets an easement to put a road on for public use. They don't have an easement to do anything with it. And the public does not have an easement to do anything on that road other than drive. He ran it along that and said, I don't have to get permission. Told the sheriff he could continue to operate it and do whatever he wanted to do, and then got sued by his neighbors for trespass and nuisance. He lost on the trespass claim. When it happened there, he was no longer in compliance with all applicable laws. The way Kansas is written similar to this, he lost all the right to farm protection because he had violated a simple tort law at the start. So that really does pertain a lot to this. The other thing is that has to be based on a change in condition in or about the locality where the ag operation exists. This can mean, and some courts have found this, not in Delaware, that we really do need the area to change because of it. And we need the area to change from ag to something else and not something else to ag. That can create problems with this. And the reason we're talking about this, and I forgot when I put this together to include the slides, that's all on me. This provides a nuisance defense. So once this happens, it's no longer an equation in a balance. If I'm a Delaware farm and I meet all those conditions, I trump any nuisance suit. Maryland's law is slightly different. Oh. So Maryland clearly lays out what type of operations we're going to protect. We're going to protect ag, silviculture, and commercial fishing or seafood operations. We are, I believe, from looking at the laws, the only state that includes in commercial fishing and seafood operations within the right to farm law. The reason we do that is the same problems that exist with a farm are going to exist with a commercial seafood or fishing operation. They're going to have odors, noises, dust, other things that could potentially create a nuisance. For those that don't know what silviculture are and have never, or me and grew up in Western Oklahoma where there were no trees, that would be the forestry industry. You have to be under operation for more than 1 year. So again, that 366-day thought, and you have to be in compliance with all applicable federal, state, and local health, environmental, zoning, and permit requirements. Maryland's requirements for being in compliance much narrower than Delaware's. Delaware's requires you to be in compliance with all the laws. Maryland's, you have to be in compliance with just those focused on health, environmental, zoning, and permits. So that's a lot more narrow than what Delaware is. So we just really need you to stay in compliance with those laws and not be operating in a negligent manner. And you're going to be protected. Now, the part of this we need to talk about is if you're in compliance with all this and you meet all those qualifications, you're going to hit what is in Delaware and almost all the other states. You go to court to have to prove that this defense applies. And that costs money. Going to court's never cheap. You still have to pay an attorney. You still got to pay potential experts to prove you meet this qualification. In Maryland, if you meet the qualifications, you go before either a county board that is set up to hear disputes within the county. Shannon's County and most counties on the Eastern Shore and a few on the western side of the state have these county boards set up to hear these disputes. Typically, we have the ag educator in the county set in as an ex officio member, if I remember correctly. We have a realtor, somebody from Farm Bureau, a couple of local ag producers, and soil conservation, a few other folks that understand ag on the program. That mediate, or they can go through the ag mediation program. So we have one of the FSA ag mediation programs in the state. You can go through that, and it is set up to hear mediations on this. The state law gives to pass. You can either go through the mediation program or have a county board. And in some cases, the county board will just call in the ag mediation program. The idea behind this is a better way to limit disputes, because this is all, in theory, should be mediated in some way to help prevent disputes and limit those future disputes. So if we can figure out a way to work out and make people figure out like, oh, if I don't do this on these days, this creates less of a problem for my neighbors. That can potentially limit a lot of the lawsuits that could happen or future need for mediation. The final thing we should talk about with Maryland's right to farm law I'm gonna go back and hit a point I forgot to hit on the last slide. And it's the same with Delaware's. The last detail is counties in Maryland can develop their own county right to farm ordinances. So we have 23 counties in the state. There are about 23 right to farm ordinances within the state. Luckily, all but a couple have the same language. All the ones I believe on the shores also protect seafood operations as well for the most part. But the biggest part is they allow the county to set up these ordinances that typically say as long as you are using generally accepted ag practices on the operation, you are out of the woods. You meet the qualifications and you are potentially protected by the county ordinance as well. What are generally accepted ag practices? Well, we made this very easy to figure out in the state. Generally accepted is anything University of Maryland Extension or the Soil Conservation District say is generally accepted and can back up and are what we're telling producers to utilize. The other thing is, even if it's not put out by University of Maryland Extension or the Soil Conservation Districts, we assume all practices in the state are generally accepted. And it is on the person complaining to prove that they shouldn't, the other party shouldn't be using that practice. That's potentially an issue, and helps solve some problems by making it be with other people. Or by the producer having to show it's generally accepted. We put that onus on somebody else. One point to make on this is, I know from talking to my counterparts, I deal a lot with right to farm laws and with a few other people who have my job around the country that sort of follow these things, and we kind of talk about them from time to time. My counterpart in Texas has talked about this. The Texas legislature has sort of changed the right to farm law in Texas, and I believe they're working on a constitutional amendment that voters will vote on later, either this year or next year. This, and their generally accepted ag practices have to be defined by A&M extension or AgriLife extension. And they want all the practices that could be laid out for any crop that could potentially be grown in Texas to be clearly defined by AgriLife extension by the time the law goes into compliant or goes into effect. That's slightly harder to do than what we do in Maryland, where we put the onus on the other party. And I'll talk about the developments due to a court decision over the summer that in a minute that Shannon was involved. Shannon's county was involved in. So the last thing I want to point out is most of these right to farm laws include a 1-year period that they have to be in operation. I can't see hands because this is a Zoom webinar and most of you can't turn your video cameras on to show me hands. And even if I were to ask this in my class when we were on Zoom, they wouldn't have done it for me anyway. So I'll just accept the fact that no one's going to show me their hands on this one. How many people have heard in, seen a TV show or something where they talked about a statute of limitations? A pause while you raise your hand. Okay, a few people are raising their hands. Thank you for raising your hand on the Zoom. That made my day. So a few people have. How many people have ever heard of a statute of repose? Not seen. Anybody use the emojis to raise their hands? I've seen a few thumbs up. So basically with a statute of repose, with a statute of limitations, let's start there. With statute of limitations, we start running this 1-year period whenever you discover that you have a potential lawsuit. With a statute of repose, the second we hit that 1-year period, even if nobody's discovered they have a problem, there's no way you can bring a lawsuit. So with statute of limitations, once there's discovery and the 1-year period runs, lawsuits have to have been brought between the discovery and the 1-year period. The statute of repose, from the second something starts till the 1-year period is hit, lawsuits have to be brought in that period. Right to farm laws have almost always been found to be statute of reposes, to where from the second the operation starts operating, So we hit that 1 year period. In a few states, it's 2 or 3 years. Whenever we hit that time period, that's when lawsuits have to stop. You have to bring the lawsuit within that period of time, and we don't care when you discover your problem. So this is a much more better way to limit ag operations from lawsuits. I think that's all I was going to say on statute of proposes. I'm getting closer to the end. So first, we're not going to touch the administrative procedures question in this because this is not an administrative procedures session. The other is within that, when the district court looked at one of these board reviews of a right to farm decision, they tied that 1 year provision that the operation had to be in effect to the land. So the operator had to have that in ag and be using it for that practice for 1 year. So we look at when they bought the land to when they did it, to when that 1 year period hit, not when the operation itself started. And as my gift says, we look at diabolical laughter. According to the court opinion, and it was varied as to when stuff happened, but we know in March of 2020, the operator buys farmland. Sometimes in 2021, either early in 2021 or late in 21, the operator began to store and apply soil conditioners, biosolids, and in September, the neighbors began to complain. So that's the time frame. The court looked at it and said, yeah, it hadn't hit that 1 year period from when you bought the farmland to when the practice started, when the neighbors complained. So we're not gonna let the right to farm law protect it. So there are issues with this. One is nuisance is tied to property rights. If we think about it, it's based around you owning property and you having your use and enjoyment of your property issues happening there. So it's potentially fair to restart it when the property changes hands, not when the operation started, because it gives neighbors an opportunity to complain. It's potentially fair. Is it the most fair way to do it? No, I'm not sure. At the same time, and I actually did use this as a test question when I taught my undergrad class this the other day. I used the exact same facts from that case because we talked about it in much more depth in class. Use the same facts and then utilize this thing that I'm just about to talk about. It creates issues because I could potentially purchase the farmland, wait 1 year, and then start using the practice, and I'm covered, and that would not be a problem. So there are issues there to where that may or may not be the best way to do it. And then, as I always point out, there were regulations that went into effect that sort of limited some of this, but it's still an issue that could potentially exist. So that is right to farm law in a nutshell. And I think I got done with 15 minutes left to ask questions. And I do a blog. You can find it at agris.umd.edu. I have a whole bunch of other stuff up there as well, doing resources on legal, crop insurance, farm policy. We did do some water conservation stuff at a time. We haven't done that lately. My podcast is also there that I do, and I need to get back in the swing of things. For those of you that may be more Southern based, you can also join in on Southern Ag Today. I think I need to update that slide, but that slide should still get you there. What questions do we have? And there's my contact info.
Thank you, Paul. That was very interesting, and you gave us a lot of good insights and a lot of good resources to use. So we appreciate your time. I know there's got to be some burning questions out there that folks have. So this is your time to put Paul in the hot seat and to pick his brains.
It'll be fun. Friday afternoon in the hot seat. Or I guess it may be late morning, depending on where in the country you are currently at. Okay.
Do you have any updates on waters of the U.S., like EPA?
I I just talked to my class about this today. I do not, because in the state of Maryland, as I pointed out to them, if the Clean Water Act doesn't apply, the state of Maryland law applies. So I do not keep up with it. I know people that do. And it's becoming, I know right now they're trying to figure out how the Biden rule will come in, or the new Biden rule will come into effect and sort of implement the most previous Supreme Court case that's name is escaping me currently. So I'm not keeping up with that as much. There are laws about fences. It all depends on which state you're in, Nancy, and how that state use it. I mean, here, Maryland, pretty much anywhere east of the Mississippi, it's dictated by state law. We do not actually have a state law in effect, and it's all court decided. And it's all pretty much, it is on the livestock owner to fence in their livestock, and non-livestock owners do not have to help pay for fences. In some states, fence law is dictated by statute and who pays for what part of the fence based on the landowners. I know where I'm from in Oklahoma, you go to the middle and everybody stares at it. And if I remember correctly, when you're staring at your neighbor's property and your neighbor's staring at your property, everybody pays to the left. You go to the middle and everybody to the left for both of them. So
Then
that-
some states get really complicated. I was just going to share in Missouri, we actually have 2 fence laws in the state, and it's really hard when you have counties that have opposing fence laws that join against each other, and people have ground on the county lines. That really get where things get fun.
You bet. You know, if they're saying also Texas, where you have some counties that are still open grays and some state counties that are fence in state or counties. It's ridiculous how bad fence law can get. We do have stuff on land rent agreements. We don't have anything beyond Maryland or Delaware mainly, because that like fence law changes from state to state. Maryland, it's June 30th, you have to give notice to the tenant, or the tenant has to give notice to the landlord that they're going to terminate, they're going to leave the lease. Delaware, I believe it's October 1st, if I remember correctly. I know from working with Pennsylvania is 30 days notice, all they have to give to kick an ag tenant off. So it changes from state to state. A lot of states it's 6 months, but it just depends on where you're at. I know Iowa and I think Illinois also have specific dates written in the statute.
Yeah, I think Iowa's is September the 1st and Illinois is October 31st. And in Missouri, we do not have a date. I wish we did. It'd make things simpler. Another question, Paul, was in regards to a good reference website for ag case precedents that could be sorted for each state.
So there really is not a good website for that. The best resource for national sort of cases that sort of follows everything is the National Ag Law Center's website does a good job at following a lot of the cases, and if they're keeping their case law indexes updated, they should have stuff sorted out by state and by some topic areas. I think they update some of that within their blog they do on their website. The problem with their blog has been they moved it onto their website, and you used to be able to sign up for updates from it. You can't do that anymore. So you kind of have to remember to go back and check that, but that's nationalaglawcenter.org, and I will put that in that chat real quick. Well, if I can get in the chat. And they're a really good resource. The other one that's actually been really good too has been the Center for Ag Law and Taxation at Iowa State. They really do follow the waters of the US a lot, and a lot of tax cases that impact parts of the country.
Paul, have you used Ag Lease 101 for example lease forms?
I have used that a lot. We based the leases we built in the state off of those. And then Center for Farm Financial Management out of University of Minnesota has another website for land rent. Fairrent.org, fairrent.com or something like, or maybe it's fairrent.umn.edu. I can't remember. That will help you calculate the land rent. It's very similar to at least the rental part that's in the worksheets on Ag Lease 101, but just much more in a website format where you can type information. Use that a lot to help people figure out what a good rent is. Because when I first started, my favorite question to get was, is this a fair rental rate to pay? And I had to say, I don't know, because you got to go do the math to figure that out. I can tell you what NAS tells me the averages are. Oh, I see a question in the question box.
Let's see. No, there's some folks sharing some links in the chat box, which will be really helpful.
Oh yeah. So with a lot of that, with everything that was put in the question box, the biggest things to do with that, especially with the bulls running their way across the fence, call the sheriff on some of that, because they're going to have to come out and help document it to make it very clear that there's stray animals coming on and get to your neighbors. My parents had a neighbor who never closed his fences because he had no pastures left at that point. So it's really great for his livestock to go on somebody else's pasture and eat their grass because he wasn't keeping his pastures up, and he just had to keep calling the sheriff. So the sheriff could come out and send a deputy out, waste the deputy's time to document it, but then it was documented. Oh yeah, I should have said this was under the Q&A.
Yeah, the question was about how do you deal with neighbors who don't care that they're using our resources? There are always problems such as flooding, hill sliding, bulls finding their way to the heifers on the other side of the fence.
And then with the flooding and the hill sliding, call out, work with USDA to start documenting what some of this is so you can highlight what the problems are, because on that, they're going to have to put practices in place that stop it, because that's creating issues for you. I know with water, and I can't remember what all the rules are, but you cannot change the flow of water to create issues for your neighbors. So they may be doing that with the flooding. Hill sliding, you can't let your property cannot impact your neighbor's property in some way. So that's a good way to get started, to highlight that they're doing it wrong. And then you can work with an attorney to get them to fix the problems. And I think I answered that question. I love Stump the Chump.
And then someone commented in chat, it's the same with noxious weeds, need to document and contact county weed inspectors.
Yeah, and if you don't have county weed inspectors, contact the Department of Ag, because depending on the state, if you don't have, because we don't have county weed inspectors, if I remember correctly, we just have to call the Ag department and somebody will come out and inspect it. What other questions do folks have? And I was pretty close on what the Fair Rent website was, it looks like, from what Colleen put in the chat. It's fairrent.umn.edu. Gotta be some more legal questions. You can play Stump the Chump, guys. This is what I love doing on webinars and county meetings. I love playing the chump. I'm not seeing email.
So, Paul, a question for you. I heard you mention this, and maybe I just misheard. You're talking about mediation early on, and you said something about FSA. Who runs mediation out of Maryland?
At the Department of Ag.
The Department of Ag, okay.
It's an ag mediator in the Department of Ag who works with a team of mediators to go out. It varies from state to state. Delaware does not have one. I know Pennsylvania's is run by Penn State. And I think,
Missouri's is ran by the Department of Ag as well.
yeah, and Kansas is, I think, is run by K-State, if I remember correctly. I think,
Well, I know that some producers are kind of scared of using mediation, but could you maybe talk about what some of the benefits are, or the pitfalls, or what people should watch out for?
so the biggest benefit of mediation is, I'm not even going to ask for show of hands on this because I already know how many people are not going to raise their hand. How many people want to go to court? I don't even want to go to court, and I'm a lawyer, guys. I don't want to be in there. It's really stressful when you go in. There's a judge and everything in there. So the biggest benefit is you're not in court. You're not dealing with rules of evidence. You're not dealing with some of the strictness that a court can provide us. It's much more, we're going in, we're going to listen to what both people have to say, and then we're going to kind of come to a consensus on what an agreement would be. And I know folks have problems wanting to go through mediation, but I believe with most USDA programs now, minus crop insurance, because crop insurance falls under different rules. You're going to go through mediation. The producer is going to go through mediation with the agency through these FSA approved mediators if they're in the state, and if not, they'll go through different mediation pools to do that. So it just provides much more flexibility in the decision that's made. So with our right to farm stuff, it provides much more flexibility in the final outcome to where about all a court can do in a normal nuisance case if the right to farm law does not apply, such as my favorite Kansas case now, because the guy who got sued really did create a big problem. The court can pretty much just shut you down and stop you. That's about all the court can do. There's no real other tools at their disposal. Within mediation, we can work to figure out how to do that. And provide a different solution where maybe we stop doing stuff at a certain time of day to allow the neighbor complaining to be able to utilize their land, where we inject stuff instead of just applying it on top of the soil and leaving it in some cases. And then the other thing mediation does is the farm bill that we're currently in that expired at some point, open the mediation program up to estate planning purposes, so you can utilize it to sort of start the conversation with families to sort of mediate out how assets will be divided up in a family farm situation. And how can a trust be dissolved? I'm not the best trust lawyer in the world. They can be dissolved. I can't remember how they can be dissolved off the top of my head, but there's a court process you go through to dissolve the trust, and all the parties involved have to do it. It's been a few years since I had to dissolve the trust, so I just cannot remember off the top of my head today. Thank you, Colleen, for stumping me today.
And how crucial is it to involve an attorney in a transition or succession plan?
So what I tell people is, once you kind of have a feel for how we're going to divide the assets up, that's about the best time to start getting the lawyer involved. Because if the lawyer's involved in helping you figure out how to distribute the assets and divide them up, they're costing you a lot of money to get to that point. So it's better to go to the mediators, go somewhere where they can help you, somewhere else, a neutral third party, a pastor, a county ag agent, somebody who can help mediate this to where we're going to have people figure out what's going where, how it's going to be, how it's all going to work. And then we can go to the lawyer to figure out what tools we need to do to make that work. So I would not go to the lawyer until I have at least an idea of how the assets are going to be distributed. Because we're not cheap to have to deal with sometimes. And if people fight, it creates the deal where we may just charge more money to make you go away and then leave us alone, depending on how bad the parties are. And the mediation programs where they exist now can really help with that.
Any other questions?
I'm glad I left 15 minutes. Sometimes this doesn't lead to anything and we just end early.
We're gonna get our money's worth out of you, Paul, and keep
That's
you
good.
the time.
I'm glad with that.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Paul, and thank you as well, Shannon. This was a great showcase, and I'm really excited to delve into some of the resources that you shared with us, and I'm sure others that were on our showcase today on this webinar will be doing so as well.
Yeah, thank you guys.
So, Doris, do you have any final comments? Anything you'd like to share?
Just to remind people that we did put in the chat the link to the national conference if you have an interest in that. And if you signed up for this showcase, you will be getting an email a little bit down the road telling you about our November showcase, and we hope to see you on that one as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, again for joining us today. We hope you have a great weekend and look forward to seeing you on our next showcase.